Believe that? I mean, this may be the last time I speak after you hear what I'm going to say, but I'm speaking tonight. So let's get started. Are we ready? You telling me I'm good? It sounds a little loud, but maybe it's because of where I am. Okay. All right, well, let's start out with a prayer. Oh my gosh, everybody's showing up. Jerry, I got a special sermon for you tonight, son. All right, so let's start out with a moment of prayer so that we can all be in fellowship. Maybe the last time tonight we're in fellowship, that's what I got to say, but we'll start that way. Now, this is my third sermon, by the way. The first one I preached when I was 9 years old, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. I might not get to it, but it was an interesting sermon. And I said, I grew up in Baraka, and we all know what Baraka says, and I said that if I ever got to actually, bring a sermon, I was going to say something different. The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me, and His word was on my tongue. Now, if you don't know where that's from, it's David in 2 Samuel 23:2. And so that is the essence of what a pastor should be doing. He should be a conduit for the Holy Spirit to speak through him, to bring the message. He should be prepared. And another thing that I really, really liked about Baraka and really appreciated was that almost every sermon he would start out with a Medal of Honor citation. And I'm going to start out tonight with the Medal of Honor citation. And it really, he would say that this person fought for your freedom. And some of the stories were most incredible. And they'll never be known again outside of this moment, but this person will. So let me get started. Private Henry Johnson. Does anybody know who Henry Johnson was? Private Henry Johnson? There was actually two of them, but this is the one I'm going to talk about. Private Henry Johnson distinguished himself by extraordinary acts of heroism at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as a member of Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, American Expeditionary Forces on May 15, 1918. During combat operations against the enemy on the front lines of the Western Front in France, in the early morning hours, Private Johnson and another soldier were on sentry duty at a forward outpost when they received a surprise attack from a German raiding party consisting of at least 12 soldiers. While under intense enemy fire and despite receiving significant wounds, Private Johnson mounted a brave retaliation, resulting in several enemy casualties. When his fellow soldier was badly wounded and being carried away by the enemy, Private Johnson exposed himself to grave danger by advancing from his position to engage the two enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Wielding only a knife and gravely wounded himself, Private Johnson continued fighting, defeating the two captors and rescuing the wounded soldier. Displaying great courage, he continued to hold back the larger enemy force until the defeated enemy retreated, leaving behind a large cache of weapons and equipment and providing valuable intelligence. Without Private Johnson's quick actions and continued fighting, even in the face of almost certain death. Quit looking him up over there, Sheriff. That's not fair. Without Private Johnson's quick actions and continued fighting, even in the face of almost certain death, the enemy might have succeeded in capturing prisoners in the outpost, and without abandoning valuable intelligence. Private Johnson's extraordinary heroism and selfishness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit on himself, Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, and the United States Army. But that's only part of the story. And now the rest of the story, as some of y'all are old enough to remember Paul Harvey, is this. I was going to have a whole outline with video pictures and text and everything else, but I can't do that because I don't have the dreaded dangle device that connects the Apple to the system. But what we're going to do is we're going to imagine. We're going to use our imagination. So I was going to say that when I raise my hands, I want you to close your eyes and I'm going to present a picture to you. But I thought that might be too much like getting the second blessing. So what I'm going to say, the signal for you to close your eyes and listen to me and create a mental image, it'll be worth it, is this. All right, let's practice, okay? You got your eyes closed? All right, keep them closed because I'm going to give you a picture of Henry Johnson. Henry Johnson was a young man. You can open your eyes. Thank you for playing around with me. It's amazing the power that I've got up here, right? It can be addictive. But Henry Johnson was a young man, and you really should see his picture because he was one of the happiest little soldiers, and he was a small man to do this incredible actions. And he was black. And his date of this action date, what they call on the Medal of Honor, the action date was 15 May 1918. But the award date, because he was black, was 97 years later. Now, he didn't know he got it, or probably did. I imagine he was a believer, didn't have a happy life, but that's not the issue. It was the color of his skin was the reason that they denied him what definitely should have been a Medal of Honor. But the French had an entirely different attitude. They awarded him their highest award like the next day. And what did the French say? Well, the French, we do not care about the color of his skin. We only care if you fight like a demon. And he did. And they awarded him, I can't even say it because I'm not very good at French or even English, but they awarded him the highest award the next day. And the sad thing is that 369 Infantry Regiment was given a nom de guerre. I like to throw out some, French terms to make people think I'm smart every now and then, And I'm sure that all y'all know what that means. It's just the name of war. But this 369 Infantry Regiment was given the nom de guerre of the Harlem Hellfighters by the Germans. And without going into great detail, it's worth noting that they never had a prisoner taken. They were the first to reach the Rhine River. They spent 191 days in combat, more than any other American unit. And when it came time at the end of World War I to do the big parade through Paris, they were not allowed to participate. That's sad. But when they got back home to New York, it was Party City. And a side note, they had probably one of the best bands in the world, a jazz band. I mean, the black people in New York City stepped up, and they fought. And for a guy from Mississippi that was raised in a very racist society, I mean, I was out of high school before I even realized that the South lost the Civil War. And I cried for 3 days. But I've learned a lot about black military history, and I have nothing but the greatest respect for the blacks that have served this country all the way going back to the Revolutionary War. But that's not the title of the subject we're going to talk about tonight. But I do want to throw out the Harlem Hellfighters was their nom de guerre. And what a great name Hellfighters would be for a church. I would absolutely, you agree with me, right? It would be a great name. And I would get a little church and get one of these big signs. All right, now close your eyes. I'm fixing to do another one. Okay? Can you see hell? And you've seen these videos, and you see hell, and you've seen people that are burning, and the skin's burning. And I would show that 24/7 as people rode up and down the street. I mean, guilt and shame and fear. Well, it built the Catholic Church. It would probably be good for any church. But, and then can you imagine? I would get little Hellfighter T-shirts for the kids that came to the church, and they would go to school and get in trouble. You know? And then somebody would ask them, well, what church do you go to? I go to the First Baptist. Well, I go to the Hellfighter Church. I'm a little Hellfighter. That's all I'm going to say about that. But now I'm going to get into some very personal things. Yo tengo 62 años. Now, probably Julio is the only one in here that Mark is the only one in here that knows what that means. But I just said I'm 72 years old. And being 72 years old, as I'm sure Doug and a few other people can attest, as you look back over your life, and you might not have seen how God was guiding you, but when you look back, you can nail it. I mean, you see that these things happened because the Lord wanted to give me a message, either good or bad. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things that have had a huge impact on my life. And the first one is RB Theme, how I was introduced to RB Theme. Now, this is not the kind of message that you would expect to hear from a from a pulpit, but this was the 1970s. And things were different back then. And I was at school at Mississippi State, and we were experimenting with drugs. And there was 4 of my friends, and one of them said, man, I got some good pot, Jamaican Gold, the good stuff. So we went out that night, and we parked in my car that my father had bought for me. It was a 1953 Buick Super, straight 8. I mean, I wish I still had that car. I cry every time I think about it. It's like a first girlfriend. You never get over them. But anyway, we're all sitting there in that car, and we're enjoying the fruits of youth. And then all of a sudden it gets quiet. And I look around, and I no longer see 3 20-year-old young men, and I knew them all. I see 3 men that are white old. It scared me. Well, I had a come to Jesus moment. And I know it was probably the drugs, or maybe not. I mean, maybe the Lord really wanted to get my attention, and He did. So I took them back, and I came back. And I sat there by myself, and I tuned that old AM radio, because that's all it had. And I got this sonorous voice that sounded so soothing and so authoritative and so smart. It was Garner Ted Armstrong. And if you know who that is, you know that he's about this far from the devil. But he sounds good. And what he was saying really spoke to me. Now, I thought I was a Christian, and I believe I was. I mean, I had walked the aisle 16 times, or 6 times. You know, I was raised in the Baptist church. We did that frequently. You know, so I was saved. I was looking for the Word. I didn't know where to look. And like the old song said, and I would play this video right now about looking for love in all the wrong places. but I don't have that ability. So I sit there and listen to it, and he was saying that he was talking about the devil, and the devil had gotten all his lieutenants together, and he says, man, we're losing. He says, what's going on here? I mean, these people are, coming to Christ left and right. We got to do something now. This is serious. What are we going to do? And one of his top lieutenants, he said, Mom, that's easy. Just tell them they got plenty of time. You don't have to do it today. You can do it whenever you get around to it. You don't have to believe today. You can do it whenever you get around to it. You don't have to get serious about the Word today. Wait till next year. Maybe things will be a little better then. And so the next morning, I went to Knapp Clark, who has had a little Baptist church there in Starkville, Mississippi. And thank goodness he was listening to RV Theme. And I told him about what I listened to. And he was a very wise man. He did not say one word against Gardner Ted Armstrong. Not one word. He just handed me a copy of Theme's book, Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And it was on. I mean, that's what I had been looking for. I was not even 21. And I would like to say two things. I would like to say that I never did the devil weed again, but then I'd have to confess. And I'd like to say that I never missed a day after that studying the Word, and I can almost say that because I got serious about the Word. That was what I was looking for. That's what I needed. So that's one story. And the second story is I didn't do well in school. I'm smart enough to do well in school. Okay, I'm not brilliant. I don't claim to be brilliant at all. I mean, I have failed some classes, and that's a real eye-opener. But I wanted to go in the Army. Probably had something to do with my daddy being in the Army. Probably had something to do with them giving me a little uniform when I was about 9 years old, and I'd dress up my uniform and march around. And when it got dirty and my mother finally got it off of me, and she put it in the washer, I stood right there till it came out. So I wanted to be a soldier. And I wanted to be a Green Beret, because that was all I knew. I mean, that movie came out in 1968, and I didn't know much about anything else. I wanted to be a Green Beret. I went and signed up in December the 25th or 6th, it was right after Christmas of 1976. And that's when they were doing away with the old GI Bill. So I aced the ASVAB. And the guy was licking his lips saying, you can be a nursing technician, operating room technician. I guess that's what he needed at the time. I said, no, I want to be a Green Beret. I want to go infantry. He said, that's not available. And I guess it wasn't because all the people that couldn't be a nursing room, technician had to sign up for something else. So I said, I want to be in the infantry. So they sent me to Fort Knox. I became a 19 Delta, which is basically an armor reconnaissance scout. And then from there, just follow this out now because I had nothing to do with this. From there, they sent me to Fort Stewart, Georgia. Well, guess who was at Fort Stewart, Georgia? The 1st Ranger Battalion. And I'm saying, yeah, this sounds good. And so I went over. I stayed there in that unit for about a year, long enough to get in trouble because I really didn't belong there. But they kept talking, kept telling me, we need you, we want you to stay. Those Rangers will kill you, they're crazy. Have you seen what they do? And eventually, I went over to the Ranger Battalion. And when I signed up in the Ranger Battalion, the first thing they do is send you to airborne school. So they sent me to airborne school. I get to airborne school, and guess who my roommate was? Tommy Benson. I hadn't talked to him in years. He was in A Company, 2nd of the 20th Special Forces Group, which was a National Guard unit in Mississippi. And there was another company, Charlie Company, 20th Special, 2nd Battalion, 20th Special Forces Group, that was 80 miles from my hometown. So if the Lord had not put me, if the Lord had allowed me to be an infantryman, I might have ended up in Kansas or someplace horrible. I wouldn't have gone to, I can just see how all that worked out. And so when I got out off active duty, they were happy to have me. They didn't have to send me to airborne school or anything else. So I signed up, and I eventually ended up getting to go to Green Beret School. So the third thing that happened to me is how I came here to Austin Bible Church. It wasn't anything I planned. Of course, I've never planned anything in my life. It's really, I just kind of go with the flow. It's all worked out so well. You're going to die soon anyway, so why get too worried about it? But it all started with me going to hike the Appalachian Trail. I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail and was convinced I could do it. I had all the mental attitude. I got my feet in shape. I bought all the right equipment, had too much of it. Even a lot of lightweight equipment can add up. And so I took off on the Appalachian Trail. I made it about a month. And I was about 40 miles on the stretch that I left one town and it was 40 miles to the next town. I got 20 miles in. And I counted, I was at the time taking blood pressure medicine. And I counted my blood pressure medicine and I had miscounted. I did not have enough, I thought, to make it the whole way. So I had an excuse to go back. I was going to die if I didn't, because nobody wants to quit. So I turn around. This was the night before. It was 20 degrees. 4,000 feet, and the wind was blowing 20 knots an hour. That may have had something to do with me wanting to go back. But I turned around and start walking back. And I don't know if y'all saw this on Fox. If you watch Fox, you probably saw what they call the Bama Rush, where the little girls get all excited about what sorority they're going to join. I've seen that at Ole Miss. It's something to see. It is a cultural phenomena that only occurs in a few places in the South. But there's another side to that. And it's called the walk of shame. And so for 3 days, let me tell you what the walk of shame is first. You know what the Bama Rush is, where they tell them what sorority they're going to be in. They spent thousands of dollars on their outfit. Literally, I've been watching a few of these videos, getting ready to preach, and just for research. And they spend thousands of dollars on their uniform or their outfit. And when they get there, they all collect at Ole Miss. I saw it one time, and then I left the next year. And I thought, man, I've been really missing out on something. But they all collect there. And they announce where they are, what sorority they're going to, because they've all been through rush week. And then they start running in high heels to get to their sorority, and don't get in their way. And the ones that don't get selected, you've never seen such ruined makeup, crying. And the EMCs are there, or EMS is there, just in case they hyperventilate or something. So that's the Bama Rush, but the walk of shame usually happens a couple months later. Does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? You probably don't, because if you hadn't had the privilege of attending a Southern school that's steeped in traditions, questionable traditions, the walk of shame is what happens to that little sorority girl about a month after she gets selected, and she goes to a fraternity party, and she gets up the next morning. And she shouldn't have been there anyway. And she has to walk back to her sorority house. And if you hadn't seen these colleges, they're fascinating. They've got rows of these big, huge houses. And they got house mamas, and it's something to see. And so she has to walk back, and that's called the walk of shame. Now they've changed it because now they've upgraded it, and they call it the Uber de Shame, the Uber of shame. So they just call the Uber. And they don't have to walk anymore. So I'm on a 3-day walk of shame. I am ashamed of the fact that I am quitting, because that's the last thing that, an ex-Green Beret does is quit. You go till you die. But this all relates to why I'm here. So as for 3 days, I'm walking back. And whenever I ran into somebody on the trail, I just kind of like, I'm walking, And it got so bad that if I saw them coming, I'd hide till they went past because I didn't want to talk to them. But anyway, the last day, when I'm just about out of my meds because I don't know how to count, even though I got a degree in accounting and a degree in mathematics, but I couldn't count, obviously. There was a guy standing there about a mile into the road. Now, this was coming back to just a desolate country road. It was paved. But there's a guy standing there about a mile from the road. And so we start talking. I mean, you talk to anybody you see on the trail because you're lonely. And he said, I'm standing here waiting for my friend to come, and I'm going to give him a ride back to wherever they had to go. And he said, it was just this morning that we called him and told him he had to come off the trail. So I said, thank you, Jesus, I've got a ride. And so they gave me a ride to the nearest town. I got my meds, and so obviously I'm living. And I'm really not even taking high blood pressure medicine. My health's never been better. But it led me, ended up after that going to Tyndale Seminary, which is a small seminary in Fort Worth. And so I went there, started going to church, and I started taking some seminary classes. I did not realize that they were Calvinist. In fact, I don't think some of them realized they were Calvinists, because I remember the last day we got into a discussion in the church. It was a small church. And some of the people there, they'd been there a long time, that were saying, you mean God selected certain people to go to hell? It's just a hard position. But anyway, so I left there. I decided I was going to come to, I'd signed up, I was going to get a doctorate in linguistics. I got a master's in linguistics from Ole Miss. I got all kind of Greek. I wanted to understand the word. And I thought that would be a good way to do it. So I came this close. Did all the things I needed to do, took the G again, passed everything I needed to do, got everything in, and I think they would have let me in. I went and hung out with them a day for their celebration. But it just wasn't right. So I decided to come down here to the University of Texas, not knowing a soul. And I decided to come down here and get my PhD in linguistics, and because I wanted to study the conditional clauses in Greek, and I thought that would be a good way to go about it. So the last day that I'm getting ready to leave, the head of the seminary said, there's a church down there you might want to check out, Austin Bible Church. I said, I'll do it. And this is how God works things out. I was renting an apartment up there in Fort Worth. It had a sister apartment down here. So it was easy to just transfer, down here. They were happy to see me. And it ended up being 3.5 miles from the church. Because if it had been any further, over the last few years, before I got my eyes, I had cataract surgery. Thank you, Chris. He came and rescued me. And Glenn. Yeah. But I didn't want to drive at night. I just did not. I don't mind driving at night now. I really don't like it, but I just couldn't drive at night. So when I came here, I was 3.5 miles from church. And so I started coming here. There's one other thing that happened that has had a huge impact on my life. And I was married, had a stepson, and when he graduated 12, 13 years ago, I said, I'll take you where you want to go as long as I can drive there. So I didn't pick this place out. He said he was a little athlete, and he wanted to go into do some high altitude training. He said, well, let's go to Salida, Colorado. Great place. I'd driven through there a time or two, but I didn't know anything about it. I've been back there several times since. That's where Adam and I went skiing before he got a girlfriend, and knocked out all the fun. But it's a great place. So we went there and we spent a month there. And of course, he's out, 18 years old. He's going to be checking the girls out because thought he was God, and he was a really good-looking guy. Ended up being in the military, being a paratrooper. I was proud of him. But I had some time, so I went to the library there. It was a marvelous library. It was one of the old power plant building, or it's old, but they'd really redone it. And I went down there, and I'm sitting down there, and every day since I was introduced to theme, there has not hardly been a day that I did not listen to Bible doctrine. Even if I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to work out. And, when I lived there in Houston, I lived there in Houston for about 20 years and went every night. But I'm sitting there in an easy chair that's next to a bunch of books. And I look down and I see Bart Ehrman. And some of y'all probably know who Bart Ehrman is. And he's some guy that thinks he knows everything and, is going to tell us how Jesus became God and all the other, false concepts of religion. So I looked at his book, but right next to it was Stephen Meyer's book, Signature and the Cell, or of the Cell. And that was one of the most life-changing books I have ever read. One of the few books I've read twice. Signature of the Cell completely demolishes the possibility that life began from a random cause. And he does it scientifically. So I want you to remember who Stephen Meyer is. So right now you look like you're lagging a little bit. We're halfway through. I'll quit at 8:30 because that's what Pastor Bob would want. I would go longer, but and I could go longer. And if I said everything I need to say, I would go longer. But let's take a song break, okay, to help you remember Stephen Meyer, because you need to look him up. Okay. Close your eyes. I'm going to lead you in a song, and I know that most people in here will know what this song is about because it was very famous, and it was about baloney. My baloney has a first name. It's Oscar. My baloney has a last name. It's Meyar, or Mayar. So I think how they spell it, but it's Stephen Meyer. And if you can remember the baloney song, you can look him up. He was no small, he had a PhD in has a PhD in philosophical history from Cambridge. So he's no small scholar. He's got all the reputation. And what he said and what he proved and what you should read is that DNA is a code. Now, we heard this. It's been bandied around, but he proved it. DNA is a code. And as Bill Gates said, it's more complicated than any code that we've ever discovered. Now, 1953 was a very good year because it was the year I was born. It was the year Corvettes came about, and it was the year that Watson and Crick, came up with what the DNA looked like and kicked Rosalind Parker to the side. That's another story. But Watson was a code breaker in World War II. And what he said on his 900-word paper it changed the world, but he said, this only appears to be orderly. This only appears to be structured. He was an unbeliever. So, and then he came out about 5 years later, and he said, there's specific complexity in the DNA code. In other words, A, T, G, and C are the four parts that make up the DNA code, and they're put together and they're wrapped around, and there's a specific complexity to it, the way they're lined up and then the way they fold. And the only place that we find specific complexity is in literature, is in code, and in DNA. And the scientists have lost it because they don't know how to counter that. Because he used the same line of reasoning, which is inference to the best explanation, that Charles Darwin used when he came up with, origin of the species, to come up with the best solution for specific complexity based on what we know now. We don't find specific complexity unless there's an intelligence force behind it. We don't find walking out through the desert the Rosetta Stone and say, and actually there was 190 of them. People don't realize that. I wish they'd give that one back to Egypt so they quit complaining about it, because there are 189 more, but people don't say, well, the wind just blew through and, it made all these letters and it just happened to get it right. No. That really changed my mind. He wrote 3 books. He wrote Signature in the Cell. He wrote Darwin's Doubt, which was about the Cambrian explosion, which, goes and says, well, all these complex life forms just appearing and they don't have anything to come before it. And then lately he wrote his last book, which is called The Return of the God Hypothesis. And that's probably his best one. They're not an easy read. Josiah could understand it, but it's a difficult read. They're about 400 or 500 pages long. He tries to break it down, but he's talking about very complex subjects. And in the Return of the God Hypothesis, he makes 3 points. The first one is the signature of the cell, the specific complexity, but it didn't go into the detail that he went into in the first book. The second point is the anthropocentric fine-tuning of the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on a fine edge. If any of the more than 100 constants that they know of were to change even by the slightest, we wouldn't be here. And we know that now. And the scientists know that now. And that's one reason they're coming up, there's got to be multiverses, and that would work in a multiverse, and we're just a multiverse, one of a billion. They got problems right now, and they know it. And you're going to see more and more of this good science come about. It was the signature in the cell, the anthropocentric fine-tuning of the universe, and then the last one was the Big Bang. And for the Big Bang, I wrote this verse down. I don't know if I can find it. Oh yeah, Psalms 19:1. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. So I'm the kind of guy that it didn't work for me just to tell me, believe, you don't have to have any reason to believe. Well, we've got reason to believe. The universe is expanding. We know that now. They didn't know that, 100 years ago. It was Hubble that first came up with it. They used to think the whole universe was our galaxy before Hubble came up. And Einstein came all the way from Germany and looked through Hubble's telescope and says, yeah, I can see that. And he said the worst mistake I ever made in all of my career was to come up with a cosmological constant to make it seem like the universe has existed forever. The universe had a specific beginning. They can prove it with good science, and that drives the atheists nuts. Some of them have even said that it seems to be true, but we don't like it. Because it's right there, and it's been right there in the Bible all along. So that Stephen Meyer was the fourth major thing that the Lord brought about that really helped me. So do you want to sing the Bologna song again, or do we have it? Meyer, look him up. Okay, so I want to talk about, see what I'm at. That was page 3. Page 4 is, we're covering right now Ephesians 4:14. And there's an aspect of Ephesians 4:14 that I think is applicable to our lives today. And it says, as a result of being maturity, you have to go back and look at it. We're covering it right now. We are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness in deceitful scheming. Now, the first application there is doctrine. As Colonel used to say, doctrine, doctrine, doctrine. But the second application, and if you look at what some of these words mean, and I did, like the word for trickery is a dice trick, and craftiness and deceitful scheming. I'm saying that could apply to conspiracies. And this country, well, conspiracy has been with us ever since man came out of the garden. But so my grandfather used to tell me, son, it ain't what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that ain't true. And a lot of people are believing conspiracy theories that ain't true. And it hurts them, and it hurts the people that they're involved with. I can give you some examples here, and I'm going to give you some examples. But I'm not talking about anybody here in the church. Some of them have already left the church, and I wonder if that had anything to do with conspiracy theory. And I wouldn't say anything to them that I wouldn't say to their face, because I'm kind of a jerk about that. I'll tell you what I think if you ask me. I chewed out your son, right? You remember that? He needed it. I don't know if it did any good, but I chewed him out. And I really wanted to help him. That was the whole point of it. But conspiracy theories. I'm going to tell you about two people that I know very well. And I'm going to tell you what conspiracy theories did to them and how it destroyed their lives. And you know one of them, but you might not know about what his particular theory. You told me what happened to him after the fact. But anyway, and if you don't know who it is, I'll tell you it is, because I don't want to bring them. But I'm going to call them Gilbert, one, and Sullivan. I'm going to call them Gilbert and Sullivan. So we'll talk about Gilbert first. Gilbert was my best friend. We grew up together. I met him in the 6th grade. We were so close that, well, he had 2 girlfriends, and he gave me one of them. The ugly one, but he gave her to me. And so Gilbert and I were there at Mississippi State going to Knapp Clark's, Bible church, and we were getting into doctrine. And so he got fired up for the Lord and moved out to Houston, not knowing anybody. He lived in the barracks. You've heard I don't never know really where that was, but he lived in the barracks, and he went there for years. But then he read the Passover plot by Schoenfeld, who is a Jewish historian that said, oh no, Christ didn't really die. I mean, that blood, it was all hooked up between him and Judas just to make it look like he died, and they laid him in the tomb, and he came out, and it completely destroyed him. Now, I had something to do with his, the second part of his destruction, because I gave him a copy of Ancient Astronauts. That guy that wrote all the books. He was a clerk in a hotel, and he sold millions. Von Klanken, or whatever his name was. And I read it, and I gave it to Gilbert, and Gilbert read it, and he believed it. And it was kind of hard to believe. It was years later before I came across Ancient Aliens Debunked on the internet, and it explained all those things. I mean, they did not have a light bulb in Egypt. They did not have an astronaut down in Maya. The Mayans did not have an astronaut. The little birds that looked like they flew. The Nazca lines, I mean, really, if people are going to come all the way across the universe, don't you think they could come up with a better landing strip than a picture of a bird out there in the middle? And if they could come all the way across the universe, they could probably not crash. And they could probably not be seen. Now, I think that we are seeing some things, but I think they're demons. I really do. And if they're aliens, why don't they land on the front of the White House? Trump will make a deal with them. So, but he bought into it, and his life became darker and darker because he was a brilliant salesperson, he just had social intelligence like very few people did. He had a lovely wife that was a nurse, and he got into some sin that any man would want to get into, but most of us shouldn't, or all of us shouldn't. He started going to strip clubs, and the girls loved him, and, she didn't leave him, and Gilbert was a bad boy. And so, I wondered all my life why he didn't get slammed. Where was his discipline? And then I realized his discipline wasn't to him. His discipline was to his son. And you see it every day. I remember, it was probably 20 years ago, his son was 20, and we were riding in the car, and we were talking about that, and his son was saying, no, it's just all a myth, and, Jesus really didn't die, and, all the stuff you hear. His son was just poly-parroting it back. And then his son got in, and his son was brilliant. His son was a hacker before they even knew what hackers were. His son was hacking and sending all these spam mails for, mortgages, and one morning the FBI showed up at 4 o'clock in the morning at his house. Kind of like they did with Donald Trump. But and he got arrested, but he didn't get in trouble, and they didn't put him in jail. And leaving the court, he got in the car with some of his friends, and they got stopped, and they had pot in there, and so he went to jail. He went to prison for a year. And somewhere along the line, he got hooked up on another kind of drug that damaged the cartilage in his knee, and he can't even walk now. His leg has atrophied, and he can't even walk. So if Gilbert's not aware of the punishment, it's because he's so far out from the will of God. And I pray for him occasionally. And he had other conspiracies. I mean, we're all come from 8 men, and Stitching was right, and it was just sad. The other one was a friend of mine. We served in the same unit, Lillian. I'll call him Sullivan. But we were in that unit that all the people from Baraka wanted to serve in. The Airborne Ranger Company. And it wasn't cool. You remember the guy that had the face that looked like it was shot by a shotgun? Yeah, it wasn't him. But so I was an innocent child in a sense that I've really never been exposed to conspiracy theories. But my friend Sullivan got into it, and it was Y2K, and the world was going to end. He was convinced of it. And he was also convinced that Clinton had brought in 20,000 Japanese policemen, and they were going to take over the country. And this was before the internet. I mean, I only can imagine what Sullivan would have done had the internet been around. But well, we all know it didn't happen. So he died of a heart attack. You told me that. If you think about it, you'll know who it is. But don't tell anybody, because that wouldn't be proper. And then more on conspiracy theories. Hiking in New York, and hiking in North Carolina. I was up there about 5 years ago when I decided to take a year off from here because of conspiracy theories, by the way. And so I enjoyed myself, but I never quit studying doctrine. And I was up in North Carolina. Do y'all remember when that gentleman blew up the AT&T building? He parked outside the AT&T building and blew it up. And he blew it up because 5G was taking over everybody, and it was, it was COVID and 5G and everything else all rolled in together. So he parked his truck there in front of the AT&T building and told everybody to go away. At least he had, the good sense to, send people away, and blew himself up. So I'm up there and I'm staying a couple days with my sister's best friend's sister, if you can figure this out, okay? And she's right there in the middle of North Carolina. She left Louisiana somewhere and went up there and built a real nice house, and she was happy to help me, and I was happy to stay there because I was tired of hiking anyway. And so I went to church with them on Sunday, and this wild-eyed woman came in there and started talking in our little gathering groups. Baptist church, they get together and share. So I grew up in a Baptist church. I know all about it. So we were sharing, and she started sharing and saying, oh, yeah, that 5G, man, it's going to take over your mind. And I think it was the week after that poor guy went and had his mind taken over. So conspiracies kill people. I mean, I don't think any normal person would believe that, 5G may give you cancer if you talk on it enough. I don't know. That was another conspiracy theory. I don't have cancer yet. But probably the top conspiracy theorist, and it's nobody that you know here, was a flat earth theorist. And I was up at Lost Mabel State Park, which is a really nice park. It's about 2 hours from here. You go up toward San Antonio, in the hill country. It's like 3,000 or 4,000 feet. They've actually had maples that got pushed down during the last glacier age, and there's maples there, and there's a creek there. And so I'm getting there, and I'm, getting ready to hike. And so this guy, probably in his 40s, we're hiking together, and we're talking, and he's telling me about how this pastor had mistreated him, and he actually had. He was a legalist that should have left him alone. But then he started telling me how the world was flat, and he was convinced of it. And he was doing his best to convince me. So whenever I hike, I always have my pistol in my pocket. So I just kind of felt it to make sure it was still there, and just kind of like eased away a little bit, so I'd have room to pull it in case he really went off track. But he spent 2 hours trying to convince me that the world was flat. And we just had an example of a conspiracy theorist gone bad just a couple days ago. The CDC that got shot up with 200 rounds, that guy was convinced that COVID made him suicidal. Now, he probably was suicidal because he ended up getting killed, but COVID didn't do it for him. The conspiracy theory did it for him. So be careful what conspiracy theories, and I can just beg you to care more about Bible doctrine than you do about conspiracy theories. So that's the answer to things. And don't come share your conspiracy theories with me, because I don't want to hear them. I mean, I've seen people here walk people out to the car to share their conspiracy theories and hand them a tape or CD or whatever. But I just made a list of, and for that man at the CDC, 3 children are missing their father because that policeman got killed defending the CDC. So it's serious. So I just wrote down some popular conspiracy theories. In case you don't have one, you can pick one from this list. Atlantis. Back in the 1800s, Atlantis was a big deal because a Senator Ignatius Donnelly read what Plato said about Atlantis and believed it. And then after that, at the end of the 1800s, there were hundreds of books that were written about Atlantis. I mean, it was one of the kind of things you can't prove anyway. You might as well speculate about it. And if a senator says it, it's got to be true. That's kind of like if you read it on the internet, that's got to be true. So Atlantis is one, and I don't think anybody believes that Atlantis is real anymore. I mean, we may find it next week, but I doubt it. I'm not waiting on it. Another one is the moon landing. There were people that absolutely thought that the moon landing was fake. I mean, where did they get those rocks from? I mean, you've got men, astronauts with great integrity, and they come back and they get them all to lie about it? I mean, really? But if you read it, and you read it enough, and you have a cognitive bias, and you're affected by the Dunning-Kruger effect, which says that basically the people that think they know the most know the least, and the people that know the least think they know the most, you'll believe. Excuse me. The moon landing. Okay. Then I mentioned Y2K already. And I'll tell you another conspiracy theory that's really hurt America, still hurts America, and probably be with us longer than any of the others, and that's conspiracies about racists. I mean, that's how the good people of the South justified their keeping black people in slavery. Oh, they're not as good as us. You know, they're not as smart as us. They're hardly people. They're subhuman. And if they believed it, I suspected they believed it because of the economic benefits of it. But it's not just black people. It's Jews. It's hey, Julio. It's Spics, Mexicans, whatever they call them, right? It's people with tattoos all over their face. I was scared to death the first day I saw you. I didn't know what a gentle person you were, but I was scared. But I didn't have a conspiracy theory about you. But people do, and people get hurt, and people get killed. And we need to grow out of that, particularly as Christians. We need to be doctrine-centered, not conspiracy-centered. Okay, I got a couple others that you might find interesting, and you can pick any of these that you want. Vaccines. Okay, so that might hit close to home because a lot of people have some strong feelings about it. Let me tell you what my feeling was about it. When COVID came up and they said to go get a vaccine, I thought, well, I'll go get a vaccine. I mean, if the Lord wants to take me, He had 400 chances when I was jumping out of airplanes, and I'm still here. So I went and got a vaccine, and just to make sure it was good, I went and got a booster. But people talked about vaccines, and I came across this thing today. Sometimes you just feel like the Lord messes with you. You know, you're sitting there watching these memes, trying to relax to come down here to do a halfway decent job, and you see this on the meme, and this is the meme about vaccines. I don't need the vaccines, they said, while enjoying life without polio, without tetanus, without hepatitis A, without hepatitis B, without rubella, without whooping cough, without the mumps, without smallpox, without diphtheria, without rabies, without rotavirus, without pneumococcal, something big word, disease, HPV, and I knew a guy that had HPV, and he got cancer from it, and he was an older guy, and he just about died. It ruined his life. Meningococcal disease, shingles, and a bunch of 1800 stuff. And I wish we would go back to it so that children could die in their crib before they turn 2 from shitting to death from diphtheria or tetanus. I just can't wait for that day to come back. And God willing, it will. But I've gone 1 minute over. I've got much more to say. I've got a bunch of other jokes. But if the pastor will ever allow me to do this again, well, I will say this real quick. What I was going to talk about was fear. And we're told not to be afraid, right? But we're told to be afraid of one thing, to be afraid of missing out on His Word. So the Word needs to become the most important thing in your life. It always has been for me, and hopefully it always will be. And I was going to show this movie scene where Gina Davis, in the 1986 version of The Fly, she says, "Be afraid, be very afraid." And so I'm going to appropriate that. Be afraid. Be very afraid of neglecting the Word. So let's close in prayer. Thank you, Father, for this time together and for your timeless truths and for them putting up with me. In Christ's name and His glory. Amen.
Austin Bible Church is a grace ministry. No price is ever assigned to any video, audio, printed material, or anything provided by this ministry. Costs associated with such grace provision are paid in full by grace-oriented born-again believers in Jesus Christ, motivated by God the Holy Spirit, well-pleasing to God the Father. More information on our grace-giving policy and your opportunity to join in this grace financial fellowship can be found at the link in the description below.